Lena Lawson yanked off her apron and stuffed it into her tote bag, her feet aching from another grueling double shift at the diner. The subway platform was packed, the fluorescent lights casting an unforgiving glow on the tired faces around her. She let out a sigh, pushing a stray strand of hair from her face as the train screeched to a stop. As she stepped inside, her shoulder collided with something solid. No, someone knocking her off balance. "Whoa!" A deep voice rumbled as a strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her before she could stumble. "You okay?" Lena looked up and found herself staring into the most striking pair of dark blue eyes she had ever seen. The man in front of her was tall, broad-shouldered, and effortlessly put together in a tailored black coat over a crisp white shirt. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he had just run a hand through it. "Yeah," she muttered, pulling herself upright. "Sorry about that, long day." "I can imagine," he said, his gaze sweeping over her like he was trying to figure her out. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her stomach flip. The train lurched forward, and Lena grabbed the nearest pole, only to realize the man had taken the spot beside her. "Rough shift?" he asked, his voice smooth and low, cutting through the noise of the rattling subway. Lena huffed a laugh. "You could say that. People can be. A lot." His lips curved up slightly. "I wouldn't know. I don't interact with people much." She raised an eyebrow. "What, are you a hermit or something?" "Something like that," he said, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Or maybe I just prefer to keep a low profile." "Well, you're failing at that," she quipped. "You don't exactly blend in." He chuckled, and the sound sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I'll take that as a compliment." The train jolted as it sped through a tunnel, and Lena's tired body swayed closer to him. She caught the faint, expensive scent of his cologne woodsy, rich and completely out of place on a crowded subway. "You take this train often?" she asked, trying to shake off the strange pull she felt toward him. "Not really," he admitted, "just needed a change of pace tonight." "Ah, so you're slumming it with us regular people?" His laugh was genuine this time, deep and warm. "Something like that." Lena glanced at him again, noting the sharp angles of his jawline, the confidence in the way he held himself. He looked like someone who belonged in a sleek black car with tinted windows, not crammed into a subway car with exhausted commuters. "What's your name?" she asked. "Quinton Nash," he said smoothly. "And you?" "Lena Lawson." His eyes seemed to linger on her, as if he was committing her name to memory. The train slowed as it pulled into the next station, and Quinton glanced at the doors before looking back at her. "This your stop?" Lena hesitated. "Yeah, mine too." She stepped onto the platform, and to her surprise, so did he. They walked side by side toward the exit, the city air hitting them as they emerged onto the street. "Well, Lena Lawson," he said, turning to face her, "I hope you get some rest after your long day." "Thanks, Quinton Nash," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. She expected him to walk away, to disappear into the night like a fleeting moment. But instead he hesitated, as if debating something. Then with a soft chuckle he said, "You know, I think I might just take the subway more often." Lena blinked, watching as he gave her one last look before stepping off into the city. She had no idea that the man she had just met, the handsome stranger with the expensive scent and mysterious smile, was a billionaire. And even less did she know that Quinton Nash had just decided he wasn't going to let their paths be a one-time coincidence. Lena adjusted her grip on the tray, weaving between tables at the diner as the morning rush hit its peak. The scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, blending with the chatter of customers. She delivered an omelet to table 5 before wiping her hands on her apron, already preparing for the next order. "Excuse me," a smooth voice cut through the noise. "Can I get a coffee?" Lena turned, and her breath caught in her throat. Quinton Nash sat at the corner booth, his piercing blue eyes locked on her. He looked completely out of place amid the cracked vinyl seats and laminated menus, yet he appeared perfectly at ease. His dark coat was draped over the seat beside him, and the cuffs of his crisp button-down were casually rolled up. "What are you doing here?" she asked, unable to mask her surprise. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone in the middle of her shift. "Thought I'd grab breakfast," Quinton said, leaning back slightly, "and maybe see if the service lives up to the rumors." She huffed a quiet laugh. "You're in for a disappointment then. We barely keep the coffee fresh." "I'll take my chances." Lena narrowed her eyes at him but grabbed the coffee pot from the counter. As she poured, she felt his gaze on her like he was studying her every move. "You don't seem like the diner type," she noted. "And you don't seem like the type to let strangers buy you coffee," he countered. She set the pot down and crossed her arms. "Who said you're buying?" He smiled, unbothered. "Call it a guess." Before she could respond, a voice called from the kitchen. "Lena, order up." She glanced toward the pass, then back at Quinton. "Enjoy your coffee, mystery man." As she turned to leave, his voice followed. "I'll be here a while." And he was. Quinton lingered at the booth long after most morning customers had shuffled out, sipping coffee and occasionally exchanging remarks with her between orders. His presence was impossible to ignore, a steady disruption in her otherwise routine day. At some point, she found herself refilling his cup for the third time. "You must have places to be." "Not today," he said easily. "What about you?" She shrugged. "Same as always. Work, crash, repeat." "Sounds exhausting." "That's life." For a moment he said nothing, just watching her with an unreadable expression. Then he pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. A business card. Lena eyed it warily before picking it up. The name was embossed in sleek lettering. Nash Industries. Something in her stomach twisted. She looked back at him. "You own this company, among others." Her fingers tightened around the card. "So you are slumming it with us regular people." A low chuckle escaped him. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's just unexpected." Quinton leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "Would it have changed anything if you'd known?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "Good," he said, as if that was the answer he wanted, "because I'd rather not be treated differently." Lena studied him, searching for signs of arrogance or condescension, but there were none, just quiet confidence. "You're hard to figure out, Quinton Nash," she admitted. He tilted his cup toward her. "I'll take that as a compliment." Before she could respond, her manager's voice rang out. "Lena breaks over," she exhaled, placing the card back on the table. "I need to get back." Quinton nodded, but as she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Lena," she glanced over her shoulder. "Let me take you to dinner." Her pulse stuttered. "You don't have to say yes," he added, watching her carefully. "But I'd like to see you outside of work." Lena hesitated, every instinct telling her this was not the kind of man who fit into her life. He was polished, powerful, and completely out of her league. But there was something about him, something that made her want to say yes. Against her better judgment, she met his gaze and said, "I'll think about it." Quinton's lips curved slightly. "I'll be waiting." And with that, he stood, placed a bill on the table, and walked out, leaving Lena gripping the edge of the counter. Wondering what she had just gotten herself into, Lena stepped off the curb, her breath curling in the crisp night air as she pulled her coat tighter around herself. The city hummed around her horns, blaring, distant laughter spilling from late-night cafes, but all she could focus on was the man standing beside a sleek black car, waiting for her. Quinton Nash had sent a car to pick her up. An actual car with a driver, leather seats, and a scent so luxurious it made her feel instantly out of place. She had almost turned around and gone home, but something in her had stopped her. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something else. "You came," Quinton said, his voice warm as he opened the door for her. "You make it sound like I was planning to run," Lena replied, sliding into the seat as he followed. "Were you?" She looked at him, his expression unreadable under the dim glow of the city lights. "I thought about it." His lips twitched, but he didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the driver. "Take us there." As the car pulled away from the curb, Lena realized she had no idea where they were going. She had expected a quiet restaurant, maybe something a little too upscale for her liking, But when the car stopped in front of an elegant glass building with a rooftop lined with twinkling lights, she realized she had been drastically underestimating him. "This is private," Quinton interrupted smoothly. "I rented it out for the night." Lena turned to him, stunned. "You rented out an entire restaurant." His gaze didn't waver. "I wanted to talk without distractions." She hesitated, the weight of the gesture settling over her. This wasn't normal. This wasn't something men did for casual dinner plans. But instead of questioning it, she stepped out of the car, letting him lead her inside. The rooftop terrace was breathtaking. A single table had been set beneath a canopy of soft lights, the skyline stretching endlessly behind it. A violinist played softly in the corner and the scent of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. Lena let out a slow breath. "This is too much." "I was going to say ridiculous," she admitted, turning to face him. "But yes, also too much." Quinton slipped his hands into his pockets, watching her with something almost cautious in his expression. "Would it make you feel better if I told you I don't do this often?" She studied him, searching for any trace of insincerity. "And yet you seem very good at it." A chuckle rumbled from him. "I know how to get what I want." "And what is it you want exactly?" His gaze didn't waver. "Dinner for now." Lena exhaled, shaking her head, but there was no denying the way her pulse had quickened. She took a seat and he followed, gesturing for the waiter to pour them wine. As the evening unfolded, Lena found herself lowering her guard in ways she hadn't expected. They really talked. Not about money or business or the kind of life he led, but about things that felt real. She told him about the diner and how she had been working there for years, about her dream of opening her own bakery one day, even though it felt impossible. He listened, not just with polite interest, but with the kind of attention that made her feel like her words mattered. And in return, he told her things she hadn't expected. "I wasn't supposed to take over the company," he admitted, swirling his glass. "My father built it. He expected my brother to follow in his footsteps." Lena leaned forward slightly. "But he didn't," Quinton exhaled, his expression unreadable. "No, he died when I was 25, car accident. After that, everything changed." A pang of something sharp twisted in Lena's chest. "I'm sorry." He nodded, but there was a weight in his eyes that told her the wound had never fully healed. For the first time, she saw past the polished exterior, past the wealth and confidence. She saw a man who had been forced into a life he hadn't chosen, a man who carried burdens that no amount of money could erase, and it made her realize something. "Why me?" she asked softly. Quinton set his glass down, studying her. "What do you mean? You could be anywhere with anyone. Why go through all this trouble for a stranger you met on the subway?" His jaw tensed slightly, as if he had expected the question. "Because you didn't know who I was, you didn't care about what I had or what I could offer. And that makes me different," his gaze held hers. "Yes." Lena swallowed, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so much of her life trying to stay unnoticed, to blend in. And now, here was this man, the kind of man who could have anything, telling her she was different. And for some reason, she believed him. The evening stretched on, filled with quiet laughter, stories, and the kind of connection that felt dangerously real. But eventually, the night had to end. As they stepped back into the car, Quinton turned to her. "Let me take you home." Lena hesitated. "I can take the subway." His expression darkened slightly. "Lena," she sighed, shaking her head. "Fine." The ride was quiet but not uncomfortable. When they pulled up in front of her building, she turned to him, suddenly unsure of how to end the night. "Thank you," she said finally, "for all of this." "You don't have to thank me." She hesitated, then reached for the door handle, but before she could step out, his voice stopped her. "Lena." She turned back. Quinton's gaze was steady, unreadable. "This wasn't just dinner." Her breath caught. "I know." And with that, she stepped out, closing the door behind her. As the car pulled away, she stood on the sidewalk, her heart hammering, knowing that whatever had just started between them was far from over. Lena stood in front of her apartment door, her fingers resting lightly on the handle. The evening air clung to her skin, carrying the lingering scent of the rooftop dinner, warm bread, crisp wine, something undeniably expensive. She exhaled slowly, pressing her forehead against the cool wood for a brief second before finally stepping inside. She had barely flicked on the light when her roommate, Callie, peeked out from the hallway, one eyebrow raised in suspicion. That, Callie said, crossing her arms, was not a normal date. Lena let out a breathy laugh. No, it really wasn't. Callie stepped closer, eyes narrowing. He sent a car for you. A car, Lena. Do you know how many guys send cars? I'm guessing not many. Exactly, Callie threw up her hands. So who is this guy? And don't even try to tell me he's just some regular guy you met on the subway, because I saw the way you hesitated before answering. Lena sighed, dropping onto the couch. His name is Quinton Nash. Callie's mouth fell open, and for a moment she just blinked. Then she grabbed her phone, typing furiously before shoving the screen toward Lena. You mean this Quinton Nash? Lena's eyes landed on the image, a sleek magazine cover featuring Quinton in a tailored suit, his piercing blue eyes staring out from the page with the same quiet confidence she had come to recognize. Below his name were words like billionaire, CEO, and industry giant. A strange feeling settled in Lena's stomach. She had known, of course, he had told her who he was. But seeing it laid out like that, seeing the sheer magnitude of his world in glossy print, made it feel real in a way she hadn't fully accepted before. Callie flopped onto the couch beside her. Lena, you are dating a literal billionaire. Lena shook her head. I don't know if dating is the right word. Did he look at you like you were the only person in the world? Lena hesitated, remembering the way Quinton's gaze had lingered on her across the candlelit table, the way his voice had softened when he asked about her dreams. Callie groaned. You are so in trouble. Lena buried her face in her hands. The days that followed only made things worse or better, depending on how one looked at it. Quinton didn't fade into the background like a fleeting dream. He was present, persistent in a way that didn't feel overbearing but rather inevitable. He sent pastries to the diner one morning, alongside a note that read, "In case your shift is as exhausting as last time." He appeared outside after work on another evening, leaning against that sleek black car, waiting for her with an expression that made her stomach flutter. When Lena finally caved and agreed to another dinner, she expected another grand gesture someplace extravagant, overwhelming. Instead, Quinton surprised her by taking her to a quiet, hidden cafe where the owner greeted him like an old friend, and the scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air. This place, Lena mused, glancing around, feels different. Quinton stirred his espresso, watching her carefully. I like places where I can just exist, she tilted her head. Does that not happen often? His fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic cup. Not really. The weight of his words settled between them, unspoken but understood. Lena, for all her initial hesitations, found herself drawn deeper into his world. Not the billionaire part, the yachts, the boardrooms, the exclusive events, but him. The man who listened when she spoke, who remembered details about her life with startling accuracy. But with that closeness came an undeniable fear. One evening, as they walked along the quiet streets, Quinton reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. You're thinking too hard, he murmured. Lena let out a soft laugh. I do that a lot. He slowed to a stop, turning to face her fully. Tell me what's on your mind. She hesitated, then finally admitted, this feels unreal. Like any second, I'm going to wake up and you'll just be another passing stranger. Quinton's grip on her hand tightened slightly. I don't plan on being a stranger, Lena. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of uncertainty, but there was none. With a quiet exhale, she squeezed his hand in return. Days turned into weeks, and soon it was impossible to deny what was happening between them. One evening, Quinton invited her to an event, a charity gala, the kind filled with glittering chandeliers and elegantly dressed guests. Lena hesitated but ultimately agreed, though the moment she stepped into the grand hall, she felt wildly out of place. Quinton, sensing her discomfort, leaned down, his voice low against her ear. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." She wasn't sure if that was true, but when he laced his fingers through hers, grounding her in his presence, she decided to believe him. As the night wore on, whispers followed them. People recognized Quinton, their eyes flickering toward Lena with curiosity, but Quinton remained unaffected, his attention solely on her. At one point a woman approached, her expression carefully pleasant. "Quinton, darling, you've been keeping secrets." Quinton's jaw tensed slightly, but his voice remained smooth. "Not a secret, just someone worth keeping to myself for a while." The woman's gaze flickered toward Lena, assessing. "And what is it that you do, dear?" Lena straightened slightly. "I work at a diner." The woman's smile faltered for only a fraction of a second before she recovered. "How refreshing!" Quinton's grip on Lena's waist tightened, but before he could speak, Lena smiled. "It is. You'd be surprised how much you learn about people when they think you're not important." Quinton let out a low chuckle, his eyes shining with something close to admiration. Later that night, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city, Lena turned to him. "This world of yours." "It's a lot," Quinton nodded. "It is," she exhaled, "but I think I can handle it." He studied her for a long moment before reaching up to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I never doubted that." And just like that, Lena realized this wasn't a dream, this wasn't a fleeting moment. Quinton Nash had stepped into her life on a subway ride, and somehow, against all logic, he had stayed. Lena stood on the terrace of Quinton's penthouse, the city stretching endlessly before her, glittering in the night. The air was crisp, carrying the faintest scent of rain, and she pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders. Below, the streets moved with quiet, energy-yellow taxis weaving through traffic, distant figures strolling along sidewalks, unaware of the world she had found herself in. She heard the soft sound of footsteps behind her before Quinton's warmth settled beside her. He didn't speak right away, simply standing there, hands resting in his pockets, watching the same city she was. "You're quiet," he finally said, his voice smooth but laced with something thoughtful. Lena exhaled, tilting her head toward him, "Just thinking." "Anything in particular?" She hesitated, then turned to face him fully. "I never imagined my life would look like this, that I'd be here." Quinton's gaze softened. "Do you regret it?" She shook her head instantly. "No, it's just a lot to take in." He studied her for a moment, then reached for her hand, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "If it ever feels like too much, you tell me." Lena met his eyes, reading the sincerity there. "I know." That was the thing about Quinton, he never pressured, never made her feel trapped. He was steady, unwavering in a way that made her trust something she might have otherwise run from. A comfortable silence stretched between them before he spoke again. "Come inside. There's something I want to show you." She followed him back into the penthouse, the space sleek yet inviting. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, while the modern furnishings carried warmth rather than sterility. It was the kind of place that should have felt untouchable, yet somehow it wasn't. Quinton led her past the living area and toward a study, large bookshelves lining the walls, filled with an eclectic mix of novels, business journals, and first editions. But it wasn't the books he wanted her to see. On the desk lay a small, leather-bound notebook. He picked it up, flipping through the pages before handing it to her. Lena took it cautiously, glancing at the worn edges before letting her eyes drift across the contents. Her breath caught slightly. It wasn't filled with business notes or financial strategies. Instead, it was sketches. Detailed, intricate drawings of buildings, streetscapes, even small cafe storefronts. "You design?" she asked, looking up at him. Quinton leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "I used to. Before the company became my life, architecture was what I wanted." Lena traced a finger along the edge of the page, recognizing the precision in every line. "Why didn't you pursue it?" His jaw tightened slightly. "Responsibility." She closed the notebook carefully, setting it back on the desk. "Do you miss it?" Quinton exhaled, his gaze flickering toward the window. "Every day." Lena stepped closer. Then why not go back to it? You have the resources, the connections. It's not that simple. She tilted her head. Isn't it? His lips pressed into a thin line before he ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Maybe I've been doing this for so long that I don't know how to be anything else. Lena studied him, the weight of his words settling between them. She had always seen him as confident, decisive, yet here, in this moment, he was just a man caught between what he had and what he had once wanted. She reached for his hand, squeezing lightly. You're allowed to want more. Quinton's eyes met hers, something unreadable flickering there. Then, with a quiet chuckle, he shook his head. You always make things sound so simple, she smiled. Maybe they are. A knock at the door interrupted the moment, and a voice called from the hall. Mr. Nash, Quinton straightened. Come in. A man in a suit entered, holding a tablet. Apologies for the interruption, but the contract for the overseas project needs your final approval before midnight. Quinton exhaled, glancing at Lena before taking the tablet. Give me a second. The man nodded and stepped back. Lena watched as Quinton scanned the document. His expression shifting into something more guarded the careful, calculating businessman replacing the man who had just confessed his forgotten passion. She realized then that this world, no matter how much he wanted to step away from it, would always demand something from him, and she wasn't sure if she fit into that. Quinton signed the document with a swift stroke before handing the tablet back. Send it through. The man nodded before exiting. Lena crossed her arms, shifting on her feet. Does it ever stop? He let out a low breath. No, she hesitated. And you're okay with that? Quinton looked at her, something unspoken lingering in his gaze. Then, instead of answering, he reached for her hand again, pulling her closer. I don't know what the future looks like, he admitted, his voice quieter now, but I know I don't want it without you in it. Lena's heart stuttered. He was giving her something real, something honest. And for the first time since stepping into his world, she realized she wanted it too. She let out a slow breath, then rested her forehead against his. Then we'll figure it out. A slow smile tugged at his lips. Together, she nodded. Together. And as the city lights flickered beyond the windows, Lena knew this wasn't just a passing moment. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. Lena sat on the edge of Quinton's bed, her fingers lightly tracing the hem of her dress. The city lights cast long shadows across the room, mingling with the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Outside, the world moved at its usual relentless pace, but inside these walls, everything felt different. Quinton stood by the window, his back to her, his hands resting in his pockets. He had been quiet since their conversation earlier, his mind somewhere she couldn't quite reach. She finally broke the silence. You've been thinking about it, haven't you? He turned, his eyes meeting hers. About what? Walking away from all of it, the business. The expectations. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. If I did, I'd still need to figure out what comes next. Lena stood, stepping closer until she was right in front of him. You already know what comes next. You just have to be brave enough to take it. Quinton let out a breath, his fingers brushing against her waist. You make it sound so easy. It's not. She placed her hands over his. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. A beat of silence passed before he finally spoke again. There's a plot of land just outside the city. I bought it years ago, thinking maybe one day I'd build something of my own there, something I actually wanted. Lena's heart skipped, and now, his gaze softened. Now I think it's time. The weight of his words settled between them, a decision finally made. Lena smiled. Then let's do it. Quinton's fingers slid to the back of her neck, tilting her face up. You're really in this with me? She didn't hesitate. Completely. The days that followed moved quickly, but for the first time, it felt like movement toward something real. Quinton stepped back from the relentless demands of his company, handing over day-to-day operations to his most trusted executives. The world reacted with shock, headlines speculating about his reasons, but Quinton remained unaffected. Instead, he focused on what came next. One afternoon, he took Lena to the land he had spoken about. It was vast, untouched, with rolling green stretching toward the horizon. Lena could already picture what it could become. Quinton stood beside her, watching her expression. "What do you think?" She turned to him, excitement sparking in her eyes. "I think this is exactly where you're supposed to be," he exhaled, something shifting in his expression. "I want you to be part of it," Lena's breath caught. "Quinton." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Her throat tightened as he opened it, revealing a ring unlike anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't flashy or overwhelming, but elegant and perfect, a reflection of everything she hadn't even realized she wanted. Quinton's voice was steady as he spoke. "You walked into my life when I least expected it. And somehow you became the thing I can't imagine my future without." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Marry me, Lena." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she didn't hesitate. "Yes." Quinton slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into his arms, holding her as if he never intended to let go. And he never would. The wedding was intimate, nothing extravagant, just as Lena had wanted. A quiet ceremony surrounded by the people who mattered. Callie stood beside her, beaming, while Quinton looked at her as if she was the only thing in the world. As they exchanged vows, Lena realized something. She had once thought their lives were too different, that their worlds couldn't possibly fit together. But standing here in front of the man who had changed everything, she knew the truth. It had never been about fitting into his world. It had been about building something new together. And as Quinton kissed her, sealing their forever, she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be.